Thanks for tuning into our channel. This is a Tribe Called Dhillon Podcast. I'm Angie Dhillon.
And I'm Rose Dhillon.
And I'm Alvin Dhillon.
And we are a Tribe Called Dhillon.
Okay.
I know. And so we're going to have these awkward moments on camera where we're like, what next? But anyhow, this is what you get when you're just in the very beginning stages of launching your podcast, right? Because we're trying to find the nuances and we're trying to figure things out. And what are we talking about today, y'all?
I think the question is, why are we doing this?
The $1 million question.
The $1 million.
Yes.
Well,
why are we doing this?
Why are you doing it? Why did you sign up to do a podcast with your two sisters?
Because you guys made me.
That's true.
Truth be told.
I don't know. I think so. Maybe you said you want podcasts, so I say you talk, she talk, me talk, everybody talk.
What's with the accent now?
Why not?
I like it.
Why not? It's okay.
Okay, so no, let's be real again. Why did you decide to?
Well, I thought it would be a cool way to, kind of, it's like therapeutic, I think, for me, because I found that just talking about our issues and whatnot, it kind of gets it off your chest. Because my old way of thinking was, don't talk about it, just bottle it up and drink your way through it. And clearly that didn't work out. So I'm here to kind of talk about it and work through some things. And hopefully we can connect with some people that are kind of on the same level or going through the same struggle as us. And let's go through this journey and see what happens.
Yep. Rose?
Yeah, I mean, to add to Al, I think same idea. I'm here to just talk about topics that I'm really passionate about. As life has come, ups and downs have come. I've had my journeys of struggles. I've had my journeys through happiness. And I think, like Al said, I want to connect with folks that are just going through their daily struggles and ups and downs. And maybe if I can just share some things and some tips that have helped me, that's why I'm here.
And me, the why. Well, first of all, I want to have fun. I always have fun with you guys when we are hanging out on the weekends and we're chilling. And truth be told, we all kind of console with each other, right? We confide in each other, our deep, dark secrets, more than some of our friends. And you guys have been my sounding board and my backbone and have had my back through some of my difficulties through life. And I thought, well, here's an opportunity for the three of us now to build up some courage and see if there's like-minded people like us out there that we can connect with, and we can help to build a nice digital community, a positive digital community, like-minded people where we just connect, we share, we talk about things and get it off of our chest and carry on our day. And hopefully we leave a positive legacy behind. That's why I'm doing it.
Yeah, and truth be told, I think we spend like way too much time together. So I think we just realized, you know what, why don't we just turn our hanging out into a podcast? Because essentially that's what we do. Usually every week we hang out and we just kind of go through our week, do a little pulse check and like, hey, how you feeling? How you doing? Try to help each other out, give each other some insights like, okay, that's what happened to me this week and this worked for me, and see if it works for you. Like we're always sharing meditation music or try this and try that. And yeah, I think especially with the technology out, it's I feel like it was meant to be.
I agree. And I think it's going to help us, talk to the viewers, connect with people and help them going through whatever they're going through to just have this community where we like-minded folks can just come together and have these honest, authentic conversations.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing for me personally was the pandemic. The pandemic was hard.
Hard.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what jump-started, because truth be told, like this has been a 2-year process for us. We were kind of thinking, we spent a lot of time with each other during the pandemic. We had a great support system. Mind you, you were across the border and you couldn't cross over for a good couple of months. And that was hard.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
That was really hard. That lockdown when they, said you can't leave your house, and, I'm 6 hours away from you guys. And it was a really difficult time that I definitely had to go through.
Before I let you kind of connect, but I'm not going to lie, in the very beginning, maybe it was the first 60 days, I was like a little kid in a school, like, yes, I can work from home. Groceries are going to be dropped off at my house. Like, because I'm already a bit of a homebody, and I was like, yes, this is so cool. I don't have to have human contact, because I'm not going to lie. Sometimes as I'm getting older, like human beings are just mean. Like we're a bunch of jerks. So the first 60 days, I thrived. I'm like, I'm loving this. I don't have to do the commute to work. I don't have to wear makeup. I don't have to worry about what I'm going to wear to work in the morning. But then something kind of happened. I started getting that shift where I started missing the human connection aspect. That's what I was finding. I was
We
kind
are
of
social beings.
Yeah.
I was starting to go a little downhill. What about you?
For me, in the beginning, I enjoyed it when they finally said everybody needs to stand 6 feet apart. I was like, finally, fuck, I go to the store and everyone's always too close, man. I was like, we're standing in a lineup. There's no need to be right behind me and right in front of me. 6 feet was like, finally, they put this out there. But yeah, in the beginning, it was cool, but not really that much fun because I lost my job, unfortunately, due to the pandemic. But I was like, what are you going to do? I get to sit at home and chill out. And then it set in after a few months when I was like, oh, so this is not ending anytime soon, and this is how it's going to be now. Like, you got to wear a mask everywhere you go, because I found in the beginning it was okay, but when you're working and you have to wear a mask all day, that's when it was tough, because it's hard to breathe. Like, I remember at work, I'd go out, I call it a mask break, right? I'd go out for 5 minutes, just take my mask off just so I can breathe, and then put it back on and come back in. And yeah, it didn't become so fun after a few more months.
Yeah.
And then that's when all the irritation and irritability started.
And we got frustrated.
And so for me, it didn't make a big difference in the beginning because I've always worked from home. Since 2018, I've had a remote job, which just had me travel every month. So that part didn't really bother me. It was, I mean, I live in America, and it's a country where you can feel fear. So I unfortunately had CNN on every day, and I was like, oh my God, the world is coming to an end. So I think I overdid it with the news, the breaking news, and being in my head and being locked in the house was like just all that manifested together.
You got to be careful with the Fox News. It all depends on what news channel you're watching. Yeah, they all have their own bias, but Fox News is a different beast.
Yeah.
And everything is breaking news. Like everything is breaking news.
It was during that time. I swear every day there was some different story on the news, right? Like, and there's two things that I want to quickly acknowledge during the pandemic before we go to the channel that had all those COVID numbers from different countries. And then China's number never increased. It was stuck at 80,000 or something like that. Yeah.
The world was progressing. People are dying, and they're like, no, we're
not going to disclose our numbers. Okay. So number one, you know what? I've always had a respect for essential workers, for all the organizations I've worked for, whether you're in cleaning, janitorial, maintenance, anything, like hats off, because the essential workers kept our economy alive. Oh, yeah. They did the work that we actually couldn't do or we were scared to do. So hats off. If you're an essential worker during the pandemic, we thank you. Yeah. Thank you for keeping the economy going and for stocking the toilet paper on the shelves of the aisle at every department store, especially Costco.
Yep. Hang on, let's talk about that. What happened to people and toilet paper?
And why the toilet paper?
I don't understand why that.
Everybody's got to wipe their ass. So.
But if you're at home, you have options if you don't have toilet paper, right? Like you can
hose them down, boys.
Some people have bidets. Like we all have showers. So if it's really bad, we had options. So I never understood the toilet paper craze. Like, why were people losing their mind with the toilet paper?
I think it's really a bad judgment on anyone, and it's poor integrity when you're trying to make a profit off people when it comes to essential goods. Right. I get when like electronics is a low supply or whatnot, and you're selling a laptop that everybody wants, and you're going to cash in a little bit on that. But when it comes to essential goods and people are buying them, stockpiling, and then selling them out the back of their truck at like such an exorbitant price, like that to me was like just very poor
gone a little too far.
Yeah, that's a little much.
Well, it showed our human nature.
Yeah,
for some of
showed
us.
Survival of the fittest.
Right.
What was the most expensive toilet paper that you saw on a site?
I don't know. Mom bought all that stuff. I let her go deal with all the long lineup.
I bought like 2 years worth of that before the pandemic. That's just my nature. When I'd go to Costco, I would buy a couple. So we were good. Like I didn't have any issues with toilet paper.
Spoken like a true Indian.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I'm not Indian in the sense of indigenous. I mean South Asian. We call ourselves Indian in our culture. And we tend to buy things in twos all the time.
Absolutely.
Bulk. We keep a 6 month supply.
Tide. I had bulk toilet paper, bulk paper towels, like you name it.
Even right now at home, we have a 6 month supply of toilet paper, paper towels, Tide,
lentils,
anything that's essential that you have, and at least like a 1 month supply of milk.
Absolutely. So that was that. I think the most expensive amount that I saw somewhere until they started cracking down on the pricing, and I think it was Amazon and some of the other sites were like, listen, like, we're going to, start closing your accounts if you're going to be charging ludicrous amounts. The most that I saw for a toilet paper, I think, was $55.
Yeah, I heard like $100 people were selling out of their trunk, but
yeah, that was crazy.
That's who they are. That shows a sign of their character that they're willing to profit off of that stuff.
Yeah, and I think I know that was the first time I think globally that we all had the same amount of emotions at the same time in history, because we were all feeling
scared.
Yeah, we were, because we were all in a lockdown. Majority of us had to work from home or stay at home, and that was the advisory from the government officials. So I think for the first time, in our lifetime, we could all relate to what we were feeling at that given point in time. And I was scared.
I was scared.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you just didn't know what this virus could do. We didn't know.
Yeah.
And usually we always have answers to questions thanks to Google. But even Google was like, I don't know.
Well, the media, it was scary in the beginning, especially when there was no vaccine out, and you're seeing the numbers in like Italy where, especially the elderly folks, like they were just dying at enormous, like alarming rates, and they weren't allowed to see their family, so they were behind like a glass, or even at the funeral, there's only 6 people allowed. It was very tough to see that. And then when people started saying these are lies, I'm like, how does the world make up these kinds of stories and show you real footage of, like in New York, when people were dying at a rate where they had trucks in the back of the hospital full of dead bodies because they had nowhere else to store them. They were just dying that fast, and people are still saying this is not real. Like, I couldn't buy into that. But when I saw the footage, I was like, this is scary. And for me as a young person, I was like, okay, I'll probably survive the virus, but what's gonna happen to my parents if I bring it into the house? That was a scary part. So not going to see your friends because you know that they're going out and hanging out with other people. That was a scary time because we had no vaccine out. Everyone was scared, especially the media was keeping us afraid, and we didn't know what was gonna happen.
Yeah, that was, I think, the difficult part, was we wanted to make sure that we didn't bring anything home, because our father is a heart patient, and we know that he has an immunocompromised system. And so we were being very cautious. So, of course, that meant a lot of video chats, video calls with family and friends, not a whole lot of going out. And I wore sometimes the double masks because I didn't know any better. And at that time, we didn't have the N95. There wasn't much science behind what the masks, were doing or what they weren't doing and how protective they were. So it was a really, really scary time for me.
Just to change things up, I also will say the pandemic did do some good things. I mean, we were able to realize that a lot of us can work from home.
Yeah.
It really helped me to kind of revert and go in. I think I spent most of my life looking at the external environment, and everything was outside of me. It helped me to pause on life and stop and really just start to assess internally what's going on. And because when you can't leave the house, you really don't have a choice but to figure out what's really going on inside of me. And so that time, I will say, I really started going down that path of self-help, self-growth, discovering who I am as a person, spirituality, and it really opened up a lot of really cool doors. And I mean, I wouldn't be here doing this podcast if it wasn't me going down that journey and really understanding the power of the word courage. And so I don't know, what about you guys?
I think for me, like, it was very difficult for me because I'm a people person. So I've always like enjoyed the going to the office and like feeding off everyone's energy and having a good time. Obviously didn't like the traffic part of it, but for me, I found it difficult. So I didn't know how to really deal with it. And I found that, but naturally it just kind of happened. My alcohol consumption started increasing, and it went from, and having on the weekend to, well, I ain't got no job. I ain't got shit to do. I was like, might as well watch some Netflix and chill. And 4 or 5 o'clock hits, you're like, I think it's White Claw time. And then you have White Claw, and the next day you're like, well, I ain't got nowhere to be. Sleep until 12, wake up. And then progressively you found that you're getting lazier and lazier, and you're just consuming more alcohol, smoking weed, and because you didn't have anything else to go, because you were like, well, what can I really do? You're scared to go to the store. You can't go hang out with your friends, because especially that thing was going on where if you were hanging out with your friends or having social gatherings, your neighbors were snitching on you. So you had to be afraid of that too. So it was just me, my lonesome at home, hanging out with mom and dad 24/7 the whole day.
Well, at least, fortunately, you still had you had mom and dad, right? There were so many people that live alone that didn't have that. So it was that social isolation now, right? Who you speak to. And I think the biggest thing, because I live alone, but I mean, for you and for mom and dad, there's a 10-minute drive away. But I still had to be careful because I was going into the office. I think it was like maybe once every 3 weeks, and it gradually became once a week where I was going in. But even then, there was very few of my colleagues and coworkers that were even coming to the office because they were scared. But I think for me, what I learned so much was I thought I was mentally strong. I thought I was like mentally, I mean, forget physically, I think I'm like physically strong for a female, but I was priding that, hey, I got this. You're going to be mentally strong. But at some point, I started to notice that I was starting to crack a little bit too, that my inner dialogue with myself really was starting to become questionable, where I was starting to think like, hey, who's talking to me? Is that me or what's going on? And that's where I started to realize that, when you are isolated and you're feeling alone and you don't have an outlet to communicate, that's when you start to struggle. And I think that's why, they say we're human beings, but I like to say we're actually social beings. Like, we like to have the connection aspect, the connectivity, because that really is what connects the human spirit together. So for me, I had to really work through my inner dialogue, and that was a struggle for me.
Yeah, and to clarify, I don't live with my parents. My parents live with me, and I consider them my roommates.
As our uncle would say, is that right?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that.
Okay. So when
Thanks for clarification.
Yeah, wait till mom and dad watch this episode.
I'm wondering what she's making for me tonight.
Mom's gonna take out her broom and like, what did you say about us? We're your roommates. What about you, Rose? What did you find the most difficult aspect? Because you weren't able to come cross over and really see us. We did video chats for almost, about 4 months until, thank you, Prime Minister Trudeau. He decided to open up and allow families to reunite during the pandemic, which was our saving grace, which was your saving grace.
My saving grace. I will say that, thankfully, I mean, my employer had offered, I think it was June or July, and they came to me and said, would you like to be furloughed? And I didn't even know what the word meant. I was like, what does furlough mean? And so at the time I was married, and I said to my spouse, like, should I get furloughed? And I'm like, yeah, go for it. And I'm like, and then I realized, and I spoke to a coworker, and she's like, what are you going to do? Think about, you're in the house every day. If you don't have this job, what are you going to do? And I went, yeah, I don't have enough. I mean, we couldn't go out. You couldn't do things. And so thankfully, we was able to decline the furlough, and I had kept my job, which I really think kept my sanity, because they had let a lot of people go. The workload became a lot more bigger. So I was working, quite a long.
So you had a bit of a distraction then, right?
So I had the distraction to keep me, okay, I've got my job. And then, thankfully when the border opened, to come home and reunite with, you guys, you're my best friends. It was hard to be apart from.
Not by choice, by force.
But
I say siblings are built-in best friends, right? We're so lucky. We're so blessed.
But you got to back it up a little bit. So you have to explain what furlough means to those viewers that don't actually know what furlough is. It's a fancy way of saying
laid off. It's a fancy way of saying we'll give you your health and medical benefits, but we can't pay you to be working, and so you gotta.
My employer
go on EI.
My employer called it straight layoff. So when you're like, I'm being furloughed, I'm like, that sounds really bougie. What is that?
Yeah, even I didn't know what it was.
I knew something was happening. I was like, I was at the airport, and the flights are all canceled. There was like tourism industry was the first to get hit.
Right.
And I knew that something happened, and the manager was like, no, nothing's going to happen. And we're all like having to work from home, but I was really doing nothing because there was no work to do. And then finally, about like a month and a half in, you get the call. It was like at like 8 o'clock at night before I get a text message. Hey, are you available for a Zoom meeting tomorrow morning 8? And I was like, yeah, I think what's going to happen. And the meeting is like, yeah, unfortunately, we're going to have to let you go because there's no work, there's no nothing. And basically after that, we found out that our entire department was just demolished. Everybody was gone. They shut it down. And it was devastating. Like out of the workforce, almost like 50% was almost laid off. Mm-hmm. And that's what was like a struggle too, because now you're like, oh man, okay, like it's one thing you just think, okay, you might have a job like for a while or it might come back, but you knew it was gone. And for me, I was actually enjoying that. I was learning a lot at that new place. Obviously, it felt like it wasn't like my purpose, my passion, but it was keeping me distracted at that time. And I was learning quite a bit about the construction industry and how it works, especially when you're doing construction in the airport. It was cool. But you know what? I guess life had another purpose for me. And so I find that that's what I found is you just got to go with the flow. You start hanging on to too many things and you can only take on so much stress. You've lost your job. You don't know what's going on in the world. Can't travel. Can't see people. you just gotta just chill.
Well, and that's where I really had developed that motto. You know, I might have a plan for my life, but then the universe has a plan for my life. And so at some points in your life, you just have to let it go and just accept what's going to come to you. And
just put your hands up sometimes and surrender. Just surrender to the universe.
Let Jesus take the wheel.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And I think the other thing that was hard for us, and we'll probably dab into our next episode, is just before the pandemic, we actually lost our uncle that we were very close to. And so the work for the few months before before they started announcing the layoffs, we had a little bit of a distraction to process that.
I think it was right when it happened.
I think a month before.
It happened in February, but in March, that's when it went lockdown.
Right.
We started hearing in January of all the reports of what's going on, and then February is when things just started changing, because 2 weeks after his funeral is when they said no more than 10 people at a funeral. And
someone like me who never watched the news before this, I had no idea that this was happening. I was traveling every week to San Diego for work. I had no clue until I got a phone call from my boss saying, you can't travel. I was like, what?
Yeah. So 2020 was a rough year because we, lost our uncle just on the start, just basically the onset of the pandemic. And then we had a lot of other family losses, and our beloved family dog passed away towards the end of the year. So that was a really rough year, and it was a very challenging year for you, Al, because those 4 losses, you were very connected to the 4 losses, right?
That was a lot to deal with, which we'll get into.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
That's a whole different part.
That is, and that's the reason why I think we decided collectively, we started to realize something is going on. There's a shift with us. And if we're feeling the shift, there's got to be other people feeling the same way as us. And hence why I think this podcast, that was just kind of where it, the brewing stages, and we started. And I think we're getting to some good content, and I think we're going to leave it for this episode. And we're going to carry on talking a little bit more about how the pandemic affected us, and maybe perhaps yourself, and we can share and connect some stories. So I think we want to say thank you so much for tuning in to our very first episode. Who's that character in Shantaram? He's from Sons of Anarchy.
Charlie Hunnam.
I like to say Lin Baba. He says Dhanyavad. So we want to say Dhanyavad. We want to say thank you so much for tuning in. We really hope you were able to find some information that you can connect or share or tell your friends about. But we're going to be back again next week, so please tune in. We are a Tribe Called Dhillon podcast. And until next week, please stay safe, take care of yourself, and we'll connect next week. Subscribe, like, and share if you like this content or if anything resonates. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.